One point that is necessary to make as you are taking a look at the structure, the anatomy of the heart, is to point out that the heart cannot receive its nutrients and oxygen from the blood that is passing through the chambers. The endocardium is not permeable to gases and nutrient molecules and waste. And so how does that hard-working cardiac muscle layer, the myocardium, receive its nutrients and get rid of its waste? Well, the heart has its own circulatory system, referred to as the coronary circuit. The top illustration shows you the major arteries feeding the heart, and then the bottom, the major veins draining that blood and the waste products from the heart. Go through your notes and make sure that you can identify the list of blood vessels that are in your notes. There are more blood vessels here than are in your notes, so just pay attention to the one that are in your notes. Now that we have finished the gross anatomy part of the heart, let's take a look at the histology. In particular, we are going to be studying the cells that make up the myocardium, in other words, the cardiac muscle cells. You should have some familiarity with these cells from A&PII, from the chapter on the tissues. You probably just barely touched on the 3 different kinds of muscle tissue in that chapter. So we will be looking at the cardiac muscle tissue in more detail here. Characteristics of cardiac muscle cells? Well, there are several things. They branch, for one thing. You can see here one branch off of this and another branch off of it down here. You can see another place where they branch here and here. So that's one characteristic. Another characteristic is, like skeletal muscle, this kind of tissue, this cardiac muscle tissue, is striated. And the reason why they're both striated is that they have very organized sarcomeres that are the functional units of contraction. Another characteristic is there are only 1 or 2 rather centrally located nuclei. And then the big characteristic is these intercalated discs that you see here, which are gap junctions. If you don't remember what gap junctions are, you should go back to A&PII. When you look further at this slide, you realize that this illustration really looks a lot like skeletal muscle tissue. Only remember it's not, because the intercalated discs, the branching, and another characteristic is the sarcoplasmic reticulum in cardiac muscle tissue is not as well developed as it is in skeletal muscle tissue. It still has the same role. It stores calcium, but it doesn't store enough calcium to allow the cell to trigger contraction. And we'll talk about that in further slides. As I mentioned in the previous slide, this table really shows you the key differences between the 2 muscle types, skeletal and cardiac. From A&PII, you should be very familiar with the characteristics of skeletal muscle. And so you can see where they are similar and where they are different. So I've put this in for a little test for you. Can you tell which image is cardiac and which image is skeletal. One of the biggest differences is taking a look at the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Which one has the most complicated SR? Which one has the more extensive T tubules? That would be this one if you're looking. Observe the SR and the T tubules. That makes this skeletal muscle. Over here you see a less developed SR, and the T tubules are further apart. There are fewer of them. That makes this cardiac muscle tissue. The myocardium of the heart is made up of cells that, when you look at them initially under the microscope, they look identical. But 1% of all the myocardial cells are autorhythmic cells, also called pacemaker cells. And these are the ones that are going to initiate and generate the impulses. Now, the major pacemaker, the big boss of this conduction system of the heart, is the SA node or sinoatrial node, located in the superior, a little lateral part of the right atrium. When the SA node depolarizes, a signal is sent throughout the right atrium and across to the left atrium, and also through what is termed the internodal pathway down to the AV node. The AV node is located more medial and inferior in the right atrium. The AV node then has an extension of these pacemaker cells, these autorhythmic cells, that travels down the top of the interventricular septum. That is the AV bundle. And this is what electrically connects the atria to the ventricles, sending the signal on from the AV node down to the ventricles. The AV bundle then branches into right and left bundle branches. These are going to conduct the impulse down through the interventricular septum towards the apex of the heart. From there, these autorhythmic cells are in a pattern where they are trending upward from the apex and branching even more. Now, these branches are commonly referred to as Purkinje fibers, but you, in your textbook, will see the term subendocardial conducting network. Lots and lots of different fibers that send the message up through the contractile cells of the myocardium, sending the message from the apex upward. Make sure that you can identify not only the names of the parts of the conduction system of the heart, but also the pathway through which the impulse travels.